Well, hey everybody. Hey, I'm struggling to get my guest in tonight, so I'll just chat with you a little bit and see if we can get if we can get David on here. How's everybody doing? Today was a working day for me, so I apologize for the penguin suit, but you know how that goes, right? Anyway, let me. I just want to make sure I got live right at the right time here. All right. Isn't technology such a wonderful thing? Yep, super, super wonderful. Well, as long as it works, right? Yep. Hello, Dana Green. How are you? Well, I guess I could say hellos, huh? Because I didn't publicly. Terminator's here. And Terminator talked about how she had a daughter that teaches second and third grade. And tonight we're going to talk about education. And I have a really interesting guest who's going to tell a really interesting story, assuming that I can get him in here. But anyway, Dorothy Holloway, good evening to you as well. And Gypsy, we have royalty in the house. Dana Green, good evening to you. And of course, the famous American Roots Farm. Good evening, Jess. And I actually thought you would particularly like this one because just because of the topic. But anyway, without further ado, real quick, I want to tell you guys a little bit of a story, and then I'll bring our guest in. So first thing is, you guys know I kind of have this special place in my heart for freedom warriors, right? Anybody who's willing to go out there and fight for freedom excites me. And, I've had people on here like Callie Blackwell, who talked a lot about, medical independence and some of those things. And I met the guy that we're going to talk to tonight. I met when I was speaking at the Jim Gale event down in Florida, and he's an absolute warrior. So we're going to hear his story tonight. So I'm going to bring him on real quick. So everybody, please help me welcome David to the show tonight. Hey, David.
Tag. Hey, great to be with you. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, we're hearing you great. How are you?
Awesome, man. What a joy to be with you and start creating the world that we want to see.
Yeah. Now, could you hear me talking when you were backstage?
Yes, I caught the last couple minutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, cool. So, again, I met David. We were down at the Jim Gale event down there at Galt's Landing, and I love his energy, and I love that he's in the fight. And, there's a special place in my heart, as I mentioned to you guys, for people who are in the fight. So we're going to get to all of that, David. But I think one of the things that makes you such an interesting person to talk to is where you come from. Mm-hmm. And what created this thing for you, right? Because, they say we're molded by our circumstances, and we're molded by the things, the experiences that we have. So would you just start and just tell us how in the world you got to where you are? Because I know that's a big story, but
yeah. So I'm not sure if you're referring to my my hometown of Mount Shasta, California. But my original dream was just to make a lot of money and sit on the beach, and have all that success. And then I found out there's some things that are going on in the world that I'm not okay with. And it took me a while to figure out that education was I think the path for me, because I had a mentor, a billionaire mentor. I asked him, I said, how do you find your purpose in life? And he said, you find an injustice on the earth and you spend your life trying to correct that injustice. So I said, oh, that's a good one. And so I started thinking about it. And then as I looked into the school system, and John Taylor Gatto, who I'll mention here shortly, I found out that I went to public school, and my mother was a public school teacher. I have family members who are in the system still, working and such. But the system was designed to make me an obedient consumer, clerk, or soldier for the mega corporations in the state. And I was like, if that's true, that's a serious injustice. And so I started to figure out what the solutions were. One of my favorite quotes is by Buckminster Fuller. He said, you never change reality by fighting against something. You got to create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And this seems to be some of the frequency and truth that's rising, is that we're not trying to change these systems. What we want to do is build over here. Yeah, it's going to be more difficult, but this is a real solution. And so I started an expo in 2014 titled the Education Options Expo. And I did that for about 4 years. And then it turned to a YouTube channel. And then I found out about Anarchapulco, and I got to go down there and help out. And then I got to speak. I opened up for Ron Paul in 2018. It was amazing. He packed the house with like 1,500 people, and I went on right before him. So that was a real gift that I was given from that community over there. And then I I reached out to John Taylor Gatto through a friend who published the Ultimate History Lesson, which is amazing 5-hour interview about the history, not just of the school system, but of what's going on the earth, the financials and law, just all the courts, amazing stuff. And I reached out to him because when I am going through, and I travel a decent amount, but I see schools that are named Horace Mann School. That's Mann. And as you guys may have known, Horace Mann imported the Prussian school system from Germany in 1852 after 10 years of politicking and fighting the resistance of the locals who didn't want a compulsory school system. He got it done. And so as an ode to him, all these public schools have his name on all these buildings. Well, I told John Gatto, I said, hey, John, I appreciate you a lot more than him, and I would love to see your name on these types of buildings and see your names on these libraries. And so I got some permission from him to use his name, and then sometime later we got into business together, and I published his out-of-print book, which is titled The Underground History of American Education, an intimate investigation into the prison of modern schooling. And this is volume 1. I have Ron Paul on the foreword, and Richard Grove and David Wenzel contributed too. I got 2 more volumes coming. And so I started to get very excited because I got connected with one of the best dudes on the earth in the education world, in my opinion, John Gatto. And then we got, his YouTube channel running, and I, run some of his socials and such, because he was the 2-time New York State Teacher of the Year, 3-time New York City Teacher of the Year. And these are not political appointees in general. They're like from the grassroots. People, they do voting and they try to vote who's the best teacher. And this is who they voted in. And so he used that platform to go around and say what many teachers say behind closed doors, which is, hey, this is not helping children. And, the sex agenda is bad. And we don't agree with this. But because their paycheck depends on it, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So that's kind of how I got into the education world and with John Gatto. And then as I started to learn more, I just realized it's not just about the schools. It's about freedom in general. It's about lack of moral education, lack of empowerment. They want me to be an employee for the corporation rather than be my own man. And this is why I believe entrepreneurship is the future. And I heard a great quote from, I can't remember his name. He's an Indonesian, I think, Nobel Prize winning guy, but he said, we're all entrepreneurs. We're born entrepreneurs. He said, in the early days, we were gathering all the fruits and the berries and gather. He said, we're always self-employed. So I think this is an idea that will continue to rise. Is, maybe I'll work for a company part-time or a little bit to get some capital. And then I want to build my own thing. And that is the question is, what are you doing on this earth? And what makes you feel alive? What is going on? Hopefully it's family, love, joy, excitement, adventure, peace and love, all these great things that I could feel I was searching for as a kid, but it wasn't there on my plate because the system was captured. Even in the small little, 5,000 person town that I was raised in, I could feel the injustice. And many of you got to get permission to go to the bathroom, permission to get a drink of water. It's like, this is a natural human right. I can go urinate if I need to, or drink some over here. Like, why are you guys controlling me? Because if they let freedom and personal responsibility grow too much in the system, they lose control. They need what's called learned helplessness, which is, oh, I can't do it, so I give up. Versus you and your audience and people like us, we're like, let's figure it out. We don't know how, but we're going to figure it out, because this whole great self-ownership awakening is about us figuring out, in my opinion. And I like the quote from Frederick Douglass. He said, it's easier to raise strong children than it is to fix broken men. But I'm like, man, I got to break through, because I have all this programming and all these habits and conditioning that I can now begin to feel inside myself. It's like, okay, I got to break this up. And so that's a short, story of just finding the education world and realizing that the children are the future. We are the children. And so why are we allowing this to go on? I have so much respect for what you guys are doing, the little that I know what you're doing, working out there and helping to empower children. This is where it is. And it's intergenerational. This whole Great Awakening, it's not just happened in the last 4 years. It got pretty intense in the last 4 years and got very naked and open for many of us with eyes to see. But it took us 30, 40 years to get here, maybe 80 years to get here. Slow incrementalism. And it's like the boiling frogs analogy, right? And so now we're starting to come out. You're a visionary, Jim, some of my other friends are like, we see where we're going now. Now it's about building the community, building the tribe, as you call them, the crew, and the mag. Great words we learned in our interview some time ago. So that's a quick background of it. And just a joy to be with you and kind of share some of these insights.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the people that go and fight for freedom, Callie Blackwell, who I've had on my channel, she got in the fight because of tribulation that she had with her son having cancer. And, I got in the fight because I lost my career. And what got you in the fight, David? What got you in it?
I think it was the documentary Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. And it was about how the income tax is a complete farce and the roots of the Federal Reserve private banking system. And then he went on to talk about the RFID chip. And this is, I think, a clip from Alex Jones and Aaron Russo. And Aaron Russo asked Nicholas Rockefeller, because these guys at the highest level, they want to recruit you, right? They want to get you into their club and compromise you. We see with Jeffrey Epstein and all that stuff. And so then you can't be a free man, even though you're at the top of fame and money. If you are compromised, you're not able to say what you want to say. So Aaron Russo was getting recruited by the Rockefellers, and he asked Nicholas Rockefeller, he says, so why are you guys doing this? He says, well, we're going to get a chip and get it installed in people. And if they dissent, we'll just turn the chip off, even though it's going to have their medical and financial information and how to participate in society. We'll just turn their chip off. And so that's when Aaron Russo was like, you know what? I don't want to be on your guys' team. And he kind of parted ways with him. So that was the first one, I think, to help me question everything that I've been taught. I saw some 9/11 documentaries as well, and I'm like, are you kidding me, man? Like, it's not Osama bin Laden. There's like other nefarious hidden figures and actors in the military-industrial complex, and Dick Cheney and his great government contracts he's getting from Halliburton and stuff. I begin to incorporate. And this is one of the most helpful quotes from Socrates. He said, "There's one thing that I know, and that's that I know nothing."
Yeah.
So I start to really just humble myself and say, you know what? I used to think I'm really smart, and now I'm like, I don't really know what's going on. So I just kind of close my mouth, ask questions, and start doing research. And so those were a couple films and discoveries. And then I met Brandy Vaughn in 2015. This is just when the forced vaccines were happening in California. And she came to Santa Cruz, and I have her on video. At that time, it was just the children with all these mandatory injections and poison injections. She says, they don't just want to go after the children. They want to go after everybody. And she said they have over 300 vaccines in the pipeline that they want to inject them. Middle-aged people, older people, animals, like they just want to get everything and just inject them. And so that stuck with me. And little by little, I go to these events. I was a big Ron Paul guy, and I'm like, I don't know if, national politics or even state politics is how I changed the world. So I started studying Gandhi and Martin Luther King and civil non-compliance and peaceful civil disobedience. And it seems like that's how, you get stuff done, is you stop participating and you stop complying and you organize. So, and then I just go to these events and I realize, where are the high energy, positive freedom guys. And eventually I realized, oh, I'm one of them, and I think you're probably one of them, your community too. It's like, everybody's doing the best that they can, and they have the books and the logic, but ultimately I think there's an energetic spiritual thing. And I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about inside of us, spirit is to breathe. And there's that power inside of us that I think everyone was gifted. And I want to be part of the solution. I'm kind of tired of talking about the problems, and that's why I love Jim Gale and some of the people, the Greater Reset, and John Bush and Derek Bros and yourself, and these people like, we need to build, and we get to build. It's so funny. You're a business guy too, so you might have heard of a guy named Martin Armstrong, the forecaster. And I came across this interview he did maybe 6 months ago, and he's like, what's happening is civilization is collapsing, but we get to build it again, So it's kind of like just accepting what's going on. And when we build again, let's not put politicians in charge of us, or let's not, abdicate our responsibility to some strangers. And for me, I believe the future is voluntary living, voluntary relationships, consensual contracts. Let's make it a win-win. Let's have full disclosure of the terms. And there's going to be conflict with humans. It turns out we're not perfect. So let's prepare for that too. Let's, think about this and begin to have some visionary thought processes and even like plans that are there in place, because this thing is just getting going. And I wanted to be part of the solutions. As I go to these events and people talk about the problems, I'm like, how long are we going to be talking about this? And I hear some people, be talking about the problem for so long. And I'm like, I just get discouraged and depressed if you're just problem focused. We were in Santa Cruz and we'd had, this is during the whole lockdown. It was a super lefty statist county. They shut down the restaurants, the bars, the churches, and you couldn't go anywhere. So me and my friends, we're like, we see what's coming, right? We see the forced jab coming. And so we said, we got to gather. So we would go on the beach and have bonfires every Saturday. And we called it the Voluntary Solutions Bonfire, just to kind of set that frame. It's okay. We can talk a little bit about Fauci and Gates, but not more than 30 seconds, man. I mean, my gosh, like, you're an intelligent man or woman, and so am I. So let's use our intelligence to put some solutions together. So it kind of set up a good expectation for the gatherings. It's like, hey, dude, we're trying to have some positivity and some solution minded here. And we're just trained to focus on problems and the fear in the media. And it's all been designed that way, right? Because fear sells. This is how they get advertisements and such. And it's like, if you talk about butterflies and rainbows and stuff, the human mind's not trained to think, oh, everything's okay, versus fear, terror, earthquake, hurricane, the worst possible scenario and survival. So, so that's kind of where we're at now, is just, understanding where we are in human history and seeing if we can participate in the rebuilding process.
Yeah, so let's talk about history real quick. I want to get into a lot of these things, and I want to get into solutions and what can people do. And I think the idea of education independence is as equally important, maybe more important than food independence or energy independence or water independence or medical independence or all of these things that we've all gone out there. But let's talk a little bit back about history. So we know that the Prussian school system that came over here, in the 1800s, and I believe he was from Massachusetts, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So Prussia back then, that system was created. I know the answer to this, but if you know, I'd love to talk about it a little bit. Was created why? Why was the system even created?
Well, my research is that Prussia was a military dictatorship, and they were like mercenaries, so they were used to go out and win wars. And so they were, that's what they were famous for. And then they lost. There was a pivotal event, 1806 Battle of Jena, Jena, where the Prussians lost to Napoleon. And that's when the thinkers got together and they started having these meetings, and they actually published it. This is one of the primary sources, is the Eighth Address to the German Nations by Johann Fichte. I think that's 1808. But he basically said, we need a system of schooling where the students would never think of rebelling. In fact, we want to get rid of free will. He said that publicly.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that. Because the way that I understand it, after they lost that battle, they wanted to create a better soldier in the end.
Yeah.
It was all about arms. It was all about war. It was all about conflict. And then what would make the Massachusetts governor think that was a great idea to bring back to the States? Who knows? But he certainly did. And real quick, before I ask you some more questions, you are super involved in education today. I mean, it's your day job, right?
Yep. Yeah, I do consulting. I'm principal of Valor Academy. I do early high school graduations. I'll do workshops throughout the country. I actually got an opportunity to speak in China about homeschooling, Mexico, Florida, Texas, Mississippi, anywhere where parents are gathering, because it's time to be honest about the schools. So I do consulting for homeschool curriculum solutions. I run a homeschool group on Facebook titled Homeschool Leader, over 3,000 members there. And I see myself in the child, and mostly it's the mom and dad's blockage, right? They're like, well, what about grades and what about these things? These are all valid questions, but when you compare it to the sex curriculum and the forced jabs and even the transgender stuff going on in schools, in my opinion, the schools are metaphorically on fire. So we'll figure out all that stuff after we get your child out of the school system. But I understand, with two income families, and it's not easy. I realize there's a lot of fear from parents to remove their children from the main system. And so that's what I work on generally on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So what would you, I think you bring up a good point. So what would you tell a set of parents who love their kids but are forced to be in a two income family and simply can't do it? What do they do? What kind of options do they have?
Beautiful. So the first thing is, if you're in a two income family and this is the situation that you're in, okay, accept it, and then maybe make a 6-month plan, or maybe a 12-month, 18-month, 2-year plan, because the trajectory of these schools, I don't like to say this, but I think schools are going to either facilitate transgender surgeries very soon, or they're going to be in buildings next to these places. Because even in California, some of the conservative counties, they're already trying to hide the fact if a 10-year-old or a 11-year-old wants to change their name and they're Johnny, but they want to be Susie, then the teachers don't have to tell the parents, which is like, are you crazy? That is the most diabolical thing I've ever heard, almost. So make a plan, mom and dad, because in 2025, it's going to be worse. In 2026, it's going to be worse. Not life in the world, but the school system itself. The system has an agenda, and this is why it's compulsory from age 6 to age 18. Why would you use threats of fines or jail time for if your child's a truant when we're supposed to live in a free country? So this is why Gatto says the solution is voluntary schooling, voluntary learning. And he says, if you just made just one thing, if you just made attendance voluntary, then within 5 years, you'd see huge changes. And within 10 years, you wouldn't recognize the entire school system, because they have to use force and coercion when they're doing these types of agendas, and they use fear against the parents. But ultimately, the people have the power. So when the people get together and around the bonfire, or have some coffee or whatever you want to gather around and say, hey guys, what's going on? And what I start with is, mom and dad, you want to know the history of the school system. So I mentioned the John Gatto book. He's one of the key guys. Also, Charlotte Iserbyt wrote The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And then Anthony Sutton wrote how the Yale fraternity, Skull and Bones, also was very instrumental in creating the school system. So there's a lot of credible voices out there who see where the root is, because if the root's rotten, then the fruit's rotten. Okay, so that's the first part. Also, start redefining what is an education, what is schooling, and you got to start at the fundamentals. And so my definition of education is, an education is what you do to yourself to create a good life. And then this begs the question, what's a good life? And now we can have a real conversation. Like, what is a good life? What is a good man? What is a good woman? Like, these are real great conversations to have, because this is what we're looking for now. And then my definition of a schooling is what somebody else does to you for their own benefit. And this is why Gatto distinguished between them two. He said an education and a schooling are so far apart, they're not even related. But when people say the education system is wrong or bad, it's actually the school system. Because in my opinion, a truly educated person keeps learning until their last breath. This is a lifelong learning adventure that we're on. And to think that, I graduate high school or college, and you have the diploma or the degree, say, yeah, I'm finished. Well, if you go to the word commencement, right, you have a commencement ceremony, that means to begin. So because of all the unfun learning stuff happening in schools and colleges, we're like, oh, we're finally finished. But actually, that's when it really begins. So my philosophy is that teenagers can start learning right now. I graduate 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, get them on community college, get them on to apprenticeships, get them on to starting their own businesses, get them on to starting their own job, and get into the world because this device is the most revolutionary learning device we've ever heard of, or should I say transformational, empowering device, the internet. And of course, with all things, it's good and bad, but you have access to information. We're no longer ruled by the newspapers, television, and radio. Now we have podcasts. Now we have live type of interview kind of conversations and YouTube and Rumble and all these things. So now we have so much information, we don't know what to do. And this goes back to asking the young people, what's a good life? You know, when I consult with parents, one of the first questions I'll ask them, or if they're teenagers there, I say, has your teenager, your child, have they found their dream yet? Or are they still looking for the dream? Most likely everybody's still looking. Maybe that's the first time they ever heard that question. But nobody asked me that till I was like 21. And I mentioned I just want to make a lot of money. And it's like, because that's what I'm taught. That's what money's success. And we can redefine success in this conversation later. But that's another conversation to have too, because if it's only money, these guys are printing money. So I think we're being called to a higher way of being. And I'll just give you the definition of success I like from Coach John Wooden. He says, success is peace of mind, which is a direct result in self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become your best. Meaning, if you try your best sincerely, how can anybody fault you for that? Forget the grades, forget all these things. In your heart, if you tried your best and you really put the effort, then you know if you really are succeeding or not. And this goes back to self-assessment, self-knowledge, self-awareness. These are the real tenets of education.
Yeah, so American Roots is going to help me ask actually my next question that I had for you. So American Roots Farm, she is an educator. And we're very, very, very good friends. And she says the one thing I have heard from parents is they do not think that they're capable of teaching their kids. It's a shame when the truth is they can teach their kids and so much more. So what advice would you give an educator who's been in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is, super frustrated with what's going on in the education system, but super dependent on obviously keeping their job, as you mentioned earlier? How do we activate them? What would you say to them, David?
So to teachers that are in the system that see what's going on, again, I would say put together a plan, do some research. I participated in a school starting course from the Alternative Education Resource Organization. It was school starters course, and that would really help me. So you can find out what is your school going to be about. I found out, Tag, that there's a school in England that's completely voluntary. It's been around for 100+ years, titled Summerhill. Yeah, and they made a documentary about it. And if you type in Summerhill 2008 on YouTube, you'll see this amazing film. Here's how the school works. It's K-12. It is a boarding school, so whatever that's worth, but it's a great film. So you show up and they say, welcome to Summerhill. Here's optional classes. If you don't want to take these optional classes, no problem. We have 10 acres of land. We have a bike ramp in the front. We got musical instruments in the barn. There's a tree house up there, and go play and go be a kid. And so they see from the first maybe 3 or 4 years, play. And then 10, 11, 12, they start to look around. They see their peers who are 13, 14, 15, and they're actually getting serious. And they're like, well, what are you guys doing? And so this natural curiosity, this natural love of learning that we're all born with begins to grow and begins to become like a fire inside them of curiosity, instead of what the government school, which is force, coercion, and it puts out that fire of love of learning. So that's what I would first start, is watch that film. And then there's actually voluntary schools in the U.S. titled Sudbury Schools. I think they've been around for 50, 60 years now. There's Acton Academy in the last, I think, 12, 15 years. They've been doing really well. So there's all these different models out there for teachers. If you really want to keep working with children, then I invite you to consider starting your own school. So as I did this, and I did my expo, and I mentioned my YouTube channel, Education Options TV, I started like, okay, I like this about this school, or I don't like this about that school. And then I met the founder of the school called Beach High School in Santa Cruz, and he's graduating these teenagers. And that's why I said, okay, that's the model that I like. And so the two concepts for my school, which is Valor Academy, the first concept is that the world is the classroom. And the second concept is that anything and anybody you can learn from can be a teacher. So to the great question of American Roots Farm, which was, well, parents don't feel qualified to teach. And I agree. That's something that I come up to against also. Like, man, I did bad in school. I wasn't good in reading or English or math. I feel I can't do it. Not a problem. Now it's not about you being the resource. It's about being resourceful. And if you join my Facebook group, I have 20 free curriculum on there. One of them is the question curriculum. And so this is where in public schools, the children are not encouraged to ask questions because God bless the teachers, they have 5 classes with 30 students. They're trying to classroom manage. You can't ask questions. Or the curriculum. When are we going to need this? Shut up. Like they got to maintain the energy for their peace of mind as teachers, right? The system has just funneled all these kids in them. So questions are discouraged. But in real life, like when we're living, questions are welcome, because if you ask a really good question, you almost get half of the answer in the question itself. So begin to welcome questions in your household. And as I mentioned, the Socrates quote, well, Voltaire had a similar quote, and so did Einstein, which is, the more I read and learn, the more I confess I don't know anything. So this type of versus people think education is like a bucket and you fill it up and the kid memorizes it and you dump it on a test and that's success, right? Have high test scores. But in reality, it's an unfolding. The word education comes from the root educo, to means to pull from within, to unfold. So like Buckminster Fuller, I believe every child's a born genius. The challenge is they get D-genius, trying to please their teachers and please their parents. So one of the other helpful points is from Howard Gardner at Harvard. He determined that there's 8 types of intelligences. So of course there are mathematical intelligence and linguistic intelligences, but there's musical, there's spatial visualization, there's physical, like athletes, there's interpersonal, like engaging in people, intrapersonal, some people very connected with themselves. So he comes with 8 of them. But my conclusion is that there's 8 billion types of intelligences. Each person out here has a unique genetic code. And Gatto says your education should be as unique as your fingerprints. So if we come up with that idea that every child's different, and how to facilitate and how to guide, how to coach, more than being a teacher. Yes, mom and dad, you are a teacher. Your child is watching you. They are mimicking your language and mimicking your attitudes and body language. But if you see yourself as a hand-holding guide and a coach, then it's about encouragement. Then it's about support. And, oh, that's a good question. When your child asks you a question that you don't know, you say, that's a good question. I don't know. Who could we ask? Where could we look? And you start to get them thinking, you know what? It's not about memorizing answers. It's about being resourceful and saying, where can I go? And you start to have this guide of thinking that you're like, I can do it. Even though I don't know how to get to my goal or dream, I can do it because I can figure it out. So that's the self-confidence that homeschooling I see engenders in so many children, self-directed learning engenders. And I want to mention one of the something related to that. There's a guy named Sugata Mitra, and he won this great TED Talk award. Must have been 15 years ago by now. He's famous for putting a computer in a wall, an exterior wall in the slum in India, and didn't provide any instructions to this computer connected to the internet in India slums. And he observed it. It was a scientific experience. And he said within like 3 months, the kids are not only surfing the internet, they're speaking broken English. And then I think he said within 6 or 8 months, the children are now searching on the internet, how can I get a faster server, a faster processor for this computer? This computer's too slow. So he proved that you don't need that particular teacher saying, hey, there's what you need to do. But he has a technique which was called the grandmother method. And the grandmother is not the teacher or really a facilitator. She's just like an encourager. She would come over and she would ask the children, oh, children, what are you doing? And the children would say, oh, this is what we're doing, and go off. And she says, wow, that's exciting. And that's basically what her role was. Her role was to inquire, to compliment sincerely, and to let them know, hey, you guys are doing some really interesting stuff over here. And just to have that adult figure peering over their shoulder and saying, "Oh, this is good, Grandma? Cool." Just that little bit of positive emphasis helped them so much. So I think that's what's really exciting, is that people can teach themselves, but mom and dad, don't feel that you have to be the teacher of 7 subjects like you were in the school system. Because if you go back to the roots of the system, you see it's not designed to make people achieve their highest potential, achieve their greatest success, their greatest health, their greatest relationships. It's actually the opposite. They want people addicted to pharmaceutical drugs, addicted to all these substances, and to lower their frequency and vibration, because unfortunately there is a totalitarian agenda to enslave humanity, and they're going down and they're going to lose because people like us are rising, the children are rising, the parents are rising. You know what? We don't need to change the whole world or change, save the whole world. We're just going to focus on ourselves, focus on the people around us, help and love and care for these people and ourselves, and we're going to build. And then eventually, like a lighthouse out there, people are going to say, "Oh, the light's over there. Okay, let's go." Versus we're looking for the light, and it turns out it's inside of us.
Yeah, how amazing is that? Let's talk a little bit about parents again that are in that spot. Where they're two income families. They got their kids in public school. We've talked about creating a 6-month or a year-month plan, but in that 6 months, in that year, what can we be doing at home to help our kids be independent thinkers and help combat what's going on, the indoctrination that you talk about in public schools?
Yeah. So the way John Gatto did it is that he taught 8th graders in New York. He let the children see the system that they were a part of. Meaning, he says, isn't it interesting that you only get 40 minutes in here, and then the bell rings every period to distract you? So he actually called out what his books are about, and he says, notice this system that you're in. So he pointed out the superficialness of the system. And so he didn't, go as deep as I'm going right now, but he just let him know, this system is kind of pushing you along, but what do you want to do? So he let them realize it's not that serious in there. And I had a family member who their daughter was in the 2nd grade and having a terrible time and terrified to go to school because the teachers were rude and the kids were rude, and she didn't want to go. And I said, well, let's try to see if they can change, and maybe put you somewhere else. So I came back and I said, so this is about a year later. I said, so how's school? And she says, it's great. I said, well, what's going on? She says, I'm going to this private school, very small private school, like 8 students. That's great. And I said, do they give a lot of tests? She says, yeah, but mom and dad told me they don't care about my grades anymore, so that's okay. Because it's the pressure of mom and dad oftentimes, or maybe family or culture. It's like, if you have low grades, you're stupid. If you have good grades, you're smart. Because now we're dealing with identity. We're dealing with how the child sees himself. But if mom and dad can let them know, hey, the tests you're going to get, they're not going to be really relevant in life. No one's ever asked to see my diploma, my grades, my college degree, my GPA I worked so hard for, paid $50,000. In the real world, I found out nobody cares about that stuff. So to have that, we're bringing the real world to them versus the state bringing this fabricated world of SAT test scores, right? And this is when I was in China. In China, it's illegal to homeschool, just like it was in the United States 50 years ago, right? So it was like an underground meeting, and it was really interesting. But I found out that one of the high pressure, disempowering things they have is something very stressful. I would say maybe 5 times more intense than the SAT scores out here. And it's so intense, by the time the child's like 17 or 18 years old, they say, you got to pass this test. And if you don't pass this test, your life is ruined, effectively, right? Like everything's banking on it. You got to do good. And they put so much pressure on this one test for the future of their life at they're 18 years old that they have a high percentage of teenagers that commit suicide if they don't have a high grade. So that's all made up pressure. That's all made up stress. There's 2 urgencies in life, and one is when you're bleeding, and one is when you can't breathe. Okay, these are real emergencies, they're real urgencies. But if your child gets a low test score on a test forced upon them, they're going to be totally okay. So the phases that I give parents for the homeschooling is there's 4 phases. One is Deschooling. Okay, so you want to deschool your child. Well, I should say the first one is school at home. Okay, they pull the child out of the school system and they try to replicate the school system at home.
Right.
It's 10 a.m. math time, it's 1 p.m. language time, and they duplicate. They realize it's stressful on them, it's stressful on the child. So I recommend they get to deschooling as quickly as possible. Deschooling is where you begin to release all the conditioning and pressure of school and realize that learning's fun, learning's happening all the time. The rule of thumb is that for every year your child is in a compulsory learning environment, you want to give them a month of total freedom, which means if they're in the 6th grade, then give them 6 months of total freedom. Why? Because they have to decompress from all the pressure. Just like when a diver comes up from scuba diving too fast, they need to come up and decompress. So, if you shake up a bottle of soda, you open it, you can't drink it right away. You have to open it up and let all the pressure release. So that's what I see in the school system. And so deschool and let them sleep all day if they want to. Let them play video games all day if they want to, because they got to get back to homeostasis of how they were when they were 4 or 5 years old and full of life and full of joy. Phase 3 is homeschooling itself. I define homeschooling is when a leader creates an atmosphere where personalized learning can occur. And so, mom, dad, you're the one who is the leader. You're the one who creates the atmosphere, which is mistakes are welcome, explore is okay, fail is all right, try and trial and error, and create that environment of trust and safety, emotional safety for this young being who's just like looking up, as we all did, and we're like, what's going on around here? Like, does anybody know what's going on around? And so that's the 3rd phase. The 4th phase is self-directed learning, and you might call that unschooling, or you might call it voluntary learning, but it's where you no longer have to create the atmosphere. Your child now realizes this is their life, and they realize they're responsible for their success or whatever direction they want to pursue in life. And now it's a matter of checking in and saying, hey, how are you? How's life? What are you learning? That's one of the best questions you can ask is, what are you learning? What are you reading? What are you studying? What are you watching? And begin to plant those seeds. So those are the 4 phases that I see parents go through. And I try to get them to deschooling as quick as possible, to homeschooling, and then to unschooling, and to differentiate between school at home and homeschooling itself, because learning is actually very exciting. Reading is actually very fun. When you find an author that you like, when you find a topic that you're interested in, you can't be stopped. You cannot be stopped once you really love it. And I think that's what one of the goals of education is, to allow that fire, that joy of learning to continue and not be squelched out like the government schools do.
Yeah, this is so interesting. There's several points that you wrote down there that I think make total sense to me and I can apply into my own life, which is amazing. Real quick, so we talked about what the parents can do. So what if you're an educator and you're in the system? How can you treat your students if you're trapped in that system? Are the things that an educator can do inside public schools to help our kids be better?
It's a great question, Tag. So again, this is in the documentary Classrooms of the Heart by John Gatto on his YouTube channel. He covered this, and what he did is, first of all, he realized he was harming children, and that's what his kind of motivation was. I don't want to harm these children. So what he did, he tried to meet with as many parents as possible, one-on-one. He would go to their house and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. In his classroom, with the permission of the parent, he would say, okay, what project you want to do this year? This is your 8th grade year. We got about 9 months together. What do you want to learn? And so he would allow that 8 months, 9 months to be their individualized learning project. So if, say, he had one example of a girl who wanted to become an Olympic swimmer. So she's all passionate about swimming. So how can we create something that's related to swimming? He says, well, why don't you create a swimming guide, resource for all the swimming pools in New York? Okay. So she goes around to all the pools, within her area and makes this resource, and she's excited about it. She's passionate about it. And he would mark her present in class, but she's not in class. She's out in New York City doing research, right? Doing real research. Well, at the end of the year, they actually, I think she puts it into the library catalog, And then a magazine company learns about this resource, a very helpful resource, contacts John, says, hey, we heard one of your students made this resource. We'd like to buy it. And John says, well, you got to talk to her. And she says, okay, well, she says, well, John, we can't put her name on it. She's a teenager. We're going to put one of our own writers' names on the work. So John tells her that. They offer her $500, but she rejected it because she says, if they want my resource, they'll put my name on it. Mm-hmm. So you have this pride of, this is what I did. This is mine, and I will not be bought off. And so that's one example. He would mark them present. He called it his laboratory inside of his classroom. And he said he would treat his students like college students, because he went to Columbia, and he went to seminars, right? So he would treat his class like a seminar, treating these inner city youth as if they're like young adults. And he said it only took about 90 days. And he said the work we were getting done in those classrooms was like a college seminar course, because he was treating these young people as adults, not necessarily like, let them go everywhere they want, but like treat them with respect, and not using the forced model of education on them, but allowing them to create what they're interested in. So with teachers in the system, I know it's hard because you got to manage all these students, but I invite you to look at that documentary, Classrooms of the Heart, and you can look at his film, The Ultimate History Lesson, the interview that Richard Grove interviewed him, and it was so amazing. But the essence is that the child is most important. This is all about the children. And I understand teachers, we got to make money and the system and everything, but ultimately it's about the child loving learning, becoming a powerful, respectful, humble, responsible individual, independent and productive. So the focus is on them. And you might want to talk with their parents and kind of see where they're at, because the systems are going on for a while. So it's hard to break people out of this mold of, this is how it is. You have 7 classes a day, and this is the way that it is, versus you go back in the 1800s, early 1800s, 1700s. I think it's early 1800s. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote a book called Democracy in America. And he said there was so much literacy going on. Like there was, like almost everybody was literate in this country, because people were reading the Bible. There was no compulsory schools, maybe one-room schoolhouses and different ages that are interacting. But now you have the compulsory system, and there's approximately about 80% of Americans are literate. So it's like, what were you teaching in these schools for 12 years if they can't read and write? This is a really big problem. And so anyways, it's just so interesting to look at the history and see that the religious freedom and probably having the conversations at the dinner table, and discussing and lively debates when it wasn't forced. And now you have so much homework going on. Imagine you have 7 hours of work per day, and then you got an hour, 2 hours of homework per night. I mean, I can see how students are becoming hateful towards the system, and then mom and dad become the enforcer, because now you're getting bad grades. Now you can't play on the sports team, and it's just all interrelated. So this is why John said all effort to reform schooling is a huge waste of time, energy, and resources. And that's after he's been in the system for all these years. So there are good teachers in there. I said I got family members that are in the system too, loving people. But the problem is that it's a forced system. It's mandatory attendance. It's mandatory curriculum. And that's not natural. There's no mandates in life other than the school system and jail. So consider the voluntary learning aspect of it.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would, I think, challenge that a little bit, and let's have this, is the one thing I've always disagreed with homeschooling, and there's one point that I've always kind of held that said, man, I just don't like that, is that all we save is our own kids. Right? And if we're going to take this world back and create a place, not just for my kids, but for everybody's kids and for everybody's grandkids, if I just pull everything internally and handle it all internally, what about the other kids? What do we do about it?
Yeah. Well, this is a great point, so because a lot of children might have difficult homes and they might not have able-bodied parents or parents that have the heart, the love, and the passion that you or I might.
Right.
So yeah, there is merit to localism. And I had a conversation where I'm at now, these amazing mothers out here too. So there is merit there, so everybody gets to choose your own path. And if you feel that you can reform the system locally, maybe within the local school board, then go for it. I mean, I'm not against political action. I'm just against coercion and force. But
Yeah.
it's a system. It's a system that's been here. And you mentioned it. Like there's teachers who are like, man, we want to do something about it. Well, the reality is that it's a big business. Okay, we're dealing with over a $700 billion a year business conservatively. Some people put it over $1 trillion a year with special education funding. So this is a big business for the book publishers and the bus manufacturers, the uniform makers, the food makers, the trash takers, the computer sellers. I mean, this is a big, this is a big opportunity, and some people love the system. And this is where we start to realize it's a political entity. It's the National Education Association is the largest political lobby in the country, 3 million members plus. So they like it, they get their pensions, but now we're seeing what's going on to children in these schools. And maybe for conservative sakes, it's not as bad, but California is pretty bad. New York's pretty bad, to what these kids are being put, in the situation to learn, like, am I a boy or a girl? I mean, this is the attack on objective truth. It's very simple. You look at your genitalia, you're a boy or a girl, and my conclusion, because it's kind of connecting all the dots, I think is important for parents to think about and teachers to think about, is I think they're attacking objective truth, because when you attack objective truth, now you're attacking law or justice, I should say, because justice is to find the truth. And if we can't even determine if this person with a vagina is a girl or oppositely, then this is where climate justice, social justice, all these things, there's not these justices. There's one rule in life, and that is you don't initiate harm against peaceful people or their property. And it's called the non-aggression principle, or do no harm, or however you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. But then these corporations and the financial opportunities get in here, and again, to understand their position, hey, we all want to make a lot of money. And so the question I think now is not how much money you have, is how do you earn your money? Because I think honor and morality are going to continue increasing. And if we find out that you don't have a lot of money, but you're a moral dude, you're welcome in the community. Or if we find out you have a $10 million, but you're a warmongering, person who just sells bombs and tanks and stuff, we're like, yeah, we don't want your money, man, because it comes with some type of spiritual energy. I don't know if it's karma or something. We want to find the people that have a moral code, a moral compass, and this is what schools don't teach. So this is what, one kind of challenge I put for teachers out there is, what is your moral code? And is that being taught in schools? The most fundamental question is, how do you determine right from wrong? And when I ask this question to many people who I respect or people that I look up to, they don't have an answer. That's why they let wars go on. That's why they continue to fund their own oppression. They're not able to distinguish that, what? I'm giving money, and they're taking the money and going in and bomb people in Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, for the last 50 years. So killing people is not a solution. And even if somebody breaks into your house, yeah, you might be able to justify killing them, but that's not a solution. Now you have that on your conscience, and now that person's family does not have their brother or sister or family member there. So we got to think strategically, and everything isn't black and white when it comes to the schools, because it's like we want to find out what is right or what is wrong. And if it's wrong to use coercion against peaceful people, then we should stop doing that. And we should at least have these kind of conversations. And it just gets difficult because the salaries are involved and the paychecks are involved. So this is where we got to go back to learning about entrepreneurship. And again, it's just about exchange. What's helpful for me has been learning about Austrian economics, and just basic economics. You have a product or service, and you exchange it with something of value. We're entrepreneurs now. And again, so many people have lost that self-confidence and that self-esteem that they think they cannot do it. but we got to reprogram ourselves and listen to audiobooks, listen to trainings. It's all basically for free now. You could type in how to be an entrepreneur on YouTube, and you can get a master class almost from top business people who spent their entire life studying entrepreneurship, studying these things, and they put it out there for free. So this is, again, it's tough for the people that are in the system, but if you feel empowered doing local action, I appreciate it. I've gone to the school board meetings a couple times. I speak my truth over there. And some local people are getting elected. I'm like, yeah, I'm cheering for you guys. So you participate where you can, but I think action is the name of the day, and we just got to start getting into motion to start preventing what's coming.
Yeah, so I've got in the chat tonight, there are a couple people from our community who are educators or come from the education system, and there have been talks inside our community about building homestead co-op amongst the families in here. So what kind of advice would you give these potential leaders who would steer that process inside our community about building our own homestead co-op?
Now, when you say a homestead co-op, is that like a food exchange or an educational facilitation, or what is the homestead co-op?
Yeah. What my definition of it is that my wife is teaching X topic on Mondays and Tuesdays, and the next farm is teaching whatever and whatever. But we as a community are coming together to educate our kids.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love the idea. As I mentioned, as long as it's voluntary, I mean, it's very exciting. Here's one of the distinguish in the Summerhill, which they distinguish, which might be helpful, is that yes, classes are voluntary and you don't have to be here. But if you sign up for class and you choose to come here, participate and be engaged. So that way, it's like, because if you're in a room full of people that want to be there, it's such good energy, like people are like, because I'm learning some homesteading stuff myself, and I'm asking questions, and I'm just like, oh yeah, we're sharing ideas, not for grades, not for credits, not for something later, for now. So in that co-op, I would put something in there about like, hey, if you sign up, here's what you're committing to, so make it a contract. Make it an agreement, and have, even if they're young people, it could be a one-page agreement. Hey, I sign up for this, and this is what I agree to. So they can begin to practice their sovereign ability or their self-ownership ability. It says, yes, I'm signing up for this, or no, I'm not going to sign up for that, or whatever, because everything's a negotiation in the real world. And if we put it in a contract, now we make it a win-win. But I love the idea of a homeschool co-op. I think that's going to really take off. I know, I think Jim's working on something down there, but I think a lot of people are realizing, you know what? And this is what I'm really realizing personally. This is my second year. This is my third year with the garden. And I'm like, this is hard, man. Like, you got pests, you got the water, you've been doing it for so long. So it's like, man, I want to get up to tags level, but there is this process, and I want to share some of the discoveries I had about this, because it's always like, I wish I would have been taught this in school. But if they would have taught me how to grow my own food, raise my own chickens, create my own black soil, have my own food, why am I going to go spend money on their cheeseburger? Why am I going to go buy their Doritos and their Pepsi? So I'm like, oh my gosh. So this is why the school system is such a critical part for the corporate domination, is if they have independent thinkers, they can't control independent thinkers. If they have people who are dependent on the system, as I am to a degree now with the grocery stores, I'm like, oh man, this is a problem. When they were locking us out in Santa Cruz because we didn't have masks on, I'm like, I can see this getting really bad. And I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to try with the CBDC and the digital ID. I saw Bill Gates say something. He said, if you don't have a digital ID, you're not going to be able to participate in society. And I said, great, Bill. I don't want to participate in your society, because I'm building my own community, my own relationships with people over here. And we believe in freedom of choice. We believe in honor. We believe in human dignity. And we don't want to be part of your global totalitarian thing that you guys are, feeling like you're going to get this utopia and have victory. And I think that's an important part to realize. The school system is a key part. So I love the homeschool co-op idea. I think it will be successful. And if you make it voluntary, put some contracts in there, and I think it's going to succeed. I think people are starting to really realize this is what time it is. And we got to learn this stuff, especially young people who find this stuff so fascinating and like to get dirty.
Yeah. So isn't there requirements though via, law that the kids have to be able to X, Y, and Z? I mean, so isn't there some, if we're going to make it successful, how do we stop them? I'm just going to say it the blunt way. How do we stop them from coming in and saying, we got to take your kids because you're not providing for them the things they need?
Yep. So now you're talking with the real power. It would be organized. So in California, I don't know about Kansas or other places, they do mandate that from age 6 to age 18, your child must be getting an education. This is what they say. And they use threats of fines up to $2,000 and I want to say like 5 days in jail. I mean, they use a lot of terror in the education code out here. And ultimately, it's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, you know what, these are our children. I mean, as Gatto said, he says, could there be a more radical idea than handing your children over to total strangers to work on their mind without your supervision for 12 years? So it's basically calling out the absurdity and immorality of a forced schooling system. And as I think you mentioned, or Jim, like we got to video record these people. And we don't believe in violence unless in self-defense. But even like I said, hurting people is not a good solution. We want to raise the frequency. As Jesus said, love your enemies. And anybody can love you if you love them. But when you start loving other people with agape love, I think something changes inside of them. And I realize that people are doing this for money. They're doing this for your job. And I understand that. My mom was taught for 10 years, special education in the school system. But if your job requires you to hurt peaceful people, you got to quit. So you might consider organizing and preparing for that day where they come and you have something in place, because they don't have all the resources to attack your school. Literally, if you have 12 courageous adults or families, maybe it's even 8 families, and you lock arms and you say, we're going to build this little school, this learning center, right? You can call it different names as well, right? I learned out here in California, if you call it a school, it's under one jurisdiction. And if you call it a learning center, for like just extracurricular type stuff, it's under another jurisdiction. And all we're trying to do is have a building, gather, people that want to learn, gather people with knowledge that want to facilitate. But the Declaration of Independence wasn't a petition for freedom. It was a declaration. And if you haven't read that document, I invite you mothers and fathers and teachers to read that, tonight. It's not a long document, and it declares your freedom. We're not asking for our freedom. I believe we're all sons and daughters of the Almighty One Creator, whatever you believe, Muslim, Judaism, Christianity, or nothing at all. That's not my concern. My concern is I'm connected to Source. In fact, I believe my body is a temple, and I'm starting to realize it now that this is the sacred thing which I was given. Napoleon Hill has a great prayer that he said. He was the author of Think and Grow Rich. He said, God, please help me to better use all the wealth that you gave to me at birth, which is right here in this body. And one of the ways I help parents and people remember how valuable you are is I ask them, I say, how much do you value your eyesight? If I gave you $1 million, would you sell me your eyeballs? No. If I gave you $10 million, would you sell me your, no. $1 billion, no. If I gave you all the money in the world, would you pluck out your eyeballs and hand them over to me? It's like, no, we like to see, we like flowers and seeing our family members and, smiles. You can't buy that. So what that means is that you're already the wealthiest person on the earth. You're already a billionaire, a trillionaire in what God or Source, nature gave to you at birth. So this is what's rising, in my opinion, is that we're starting to remember how valuable this life is, how special and unique and beautiful it is to be in this body, to have this kind of conversations and to exchange and to eat raspberries and strawberries and, smell flowers and swim. One of my favorite things to do is swim in the lake on a hot day. I don't know why. I just love doing that. And there's nothing in the world that I would sell out where I couldn't do that. So we're already wealthy, we're already blessed, we're already fortunate, and the people around us, they don't know how blessed and fortunate they are. So they're coming and they're telling us we have to do all these things. Well, when we were doing the beach bonfires in Santa Cruz, what we did, and the reason I got targeted in our community did, is because we were not participating. I'll tell you one story. This was early in the pandemic. We had about 15 of us on the beach, and we had a bonfire, we had some beers, and it's about 10:30, and 4 sheriffs roll up, and there might have been 5. It's all on video, but they come up and they say, so who's going to take responsibility for the fire? You can't have that. And who's going to take responsibility for the alcohol? You can't have that. Okay. And we all stayed silent. We all stood there in silence. And then he says, okay, all you guys want to be, charged for this? All right, give me your IDs. He asked for our identification, and all of us just stood there in silence and looked at him for like 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And I could feel the energy change, because at that point he was coming with his normal, we're just going to use force and intimidation. But when he met 15 sovereign individuals, 15 people who knew they owned themselves, and we have a right to be on this beach as long as we're not hurting anybody or destroying any property, with energy shifted. And then he just kind of looked at his buddies, and they're like, all right. And then you kind of like saw them walk off, and they walked off and they left us alone. And that happened multiple times, because they would come up and they would harass us, and we would live stream it like this before I was shadow banned on Facebook. And they say, again, you gotta put the fire out, or this. And we say, is this your beach? No. Who does the beach belong to? The beach belongs to the people. Excellent. We're one of the people, and so are you. Why don't you take off your uniform and just join us and have a good time? We said, this beach was here long before your organization was even created, buddy. And so we kind of came with this energy of establishing, like, we're not, we know who we are, which is we are sons and daughters of the Creator, and we're understanding where we are in human history, which is we're evolving from the monarchy, what used to be, I'm the head of the church, head of the state. If I disagree with you, off with your head. And then we evolved to the constitutional republic, or statism. And now the constitutional republic has turned totalitarian dictatorship also. And now it's evolving towards voluntarism, or I call it voluntary living, which is we're all equal in our human worth, and no one's allowed to force us to do anything. So now this is like natural rights, natural law, which we knew about in the Declaration of Independence. But again, we didn't learn about this in school. So this is why information war and propaganda is so effective, is that if you don't know who you are, then any dictator can come just tell you who you are and what's going on. But if you make a community, you join a community, and you start to look around, you're like, you know what? I respect you. I honor you as a human being, as a soul, as a spirit, like this, something like that. And now you can start to feel, oh, this is just about like evolving from monkeys, man. Like, we don't even know how we got here. It seems like a creator put us here, and it seems like everything has been designed for us, for the enjoyment and the benefit of the human species. And maybe God communes with us, and there's so many spiritual questions, but this is an evolution of freedom. We're not at total freedom yet, because we haven't got there consciously yet. Our freedom mindset hasn't got there yet, but it's coming. So we know the monarchy is BS. We know the government's BS, pretty much, right? Localism, I understand, but like national states, pretty out of control. But eventually it's going to get to the point where I believe it's going to be decentralized villages, like kind of like some of the stuff you're doing and some of the stuff's going on out here, beginning phases where we're going to have these villages or groups or communities. I think Balaji calls them the network state, but we're going to figure out who to do commerce with. We're going to figure out who can help us with medicine and health. And if some group or some individual is bringing violence or aggression, we will just stop them and ostracize them, share the information, and say, hey, this is a predator over here, and this is his past of what he's done, and here's the videos of it. And, then if you see a video of someone being violent, you don't need to go to court. It's like, okay, this guy's a thug, we're going to stay away from him. But I think it's going to be this individual kind of network community, because humanity wants to win. Humanity wants to survive and thrive. And these predators who have been building this for some generations, they controlled the mind and the media for so long. And now the last 25 years, the internet has changed the whole game for these guys. And so they're losing control of it all. And I believe we're going to come through this very powerfully, but they might try to pull some really dark shenanigans, because what do you do if you've been ruined for 200 years or something, and now all of a sudden you're going to lose your money power, your media power? A snake backed up into the corner can be a pretty dangerous thing. So we want to, I think, stay away from the urban areas as much as possible if we can. But most importantly is the people. Get around good people, and then to have these kind of conversations about what's really going on. And let's promote peace, let's promote voluntary solutions, voluntary interactions. It's so obvious and so simple. This is another reason why I believe we're going to succeed, because any idiot can complicate a matter, but it takes a real genius to simplify one. And I think that's what's happening, is we're finally getting to the point where it's like independent food, water, energy. I think, was it? I love your ungovernable scorecard. I looked at that before I jumped on the call, because I was like, that's so cool. I was like, man, you had your Excel genius guy down or create that. That was so amazing. But it's like so complicated in some ways, but then it's very simple. And it's like, here's the thing, 4 or 5, 6 bullet points. This is where we're at. And if we just focus on these things, we're going to win. And as much as we try to persuade our neighbors, our friends, our family, whoever else, I think we just got to build it, and then they will come, and then we can share with them, hey, here's what's working for us. But in terms of education, I think education is the critical part, and it's lifelong, and to allow parents to facilitate the love of that learning, and for teachers to understand, yeah, you can make local changes. There's nothing wrong with that. But just long term, what I see is that they're going to probably lower the age of mandatory attendance. It's age 6 in California, and I think that's might be nationwide. But they would, if you would hand your child over to the state at birth, the state would accept it. But they're not there yet, So I think they're going to try to go to maybe age 3 or 4, make it compulsory and go down, because they're losing control on the system, and we got to protect the kids.
Well, they're losing control of everything. They've lost control of the financial system, the medical system, the food system, 100% of all of them. Hey, yes. I had somebody email me while we were talking here, and so I just got a quick question for you, and then we'll figure out how everyone can get a hold of you and all of that good stuff again. But
sure.
So this lady's got a 3rd grader who is an amazing reader and super artistic and very creative, and the teacher says that she's one of the smartest kids in her class. But she struggles with math, and it frustrates her to death because of all the timed tests and all of these things, and it causes all kinds of stress in the home, and mom don't know what to do about it. What advice would you give her?
So she's a 3rd grader in a public school, very creative and artistic, but the math is not her strong suit, and this is causing stress at home and within the child itself.
Yeah, stress at home, and just she comes home and she doesn't do well there. Great reader, great artistic, great all those things, just struggles in math. And tell mom, just don't worry about it.
I would say, mom, see your daughter as a genius, because that's what she is. And when math becomes important to your daughter, she will get it. But she's in the formulation stage of maybe becoming one of the most important artists on the planet. So if you're a skill 10 at art, but a skill 2 at math, focus on the art, because we have calculators in our pockets now. Yes, it would be nice if she was great at calculus for whatever reason. I mean, I remember I took a 5-unit college credit course in college. It was like 2 hours a day, 3 hours of homework, crazy class, spent all this time and energy. I think I got an A or B in it. and it didn't even transfer to the university that I was going to. It was such a waste, and I never even used this pre-calculus stuff. So in math, you're probably going to need some addition, some subtraction, maybe a little bit of multiplication, maybe some division. But other than that, what do you really need math for on a day-to-day basis? And we need artists more than anything almost right now. You know, they focus on the engineers and all the people that the government needs, but actually what we need are the creative thinkers, the visionaries, the people who can paint a future of the world that we want to live in. So I don't know what type of art she's interested in, but I would say, Mom, the reason you're worried about math is because you went to the government school system probably too, just like I did. You know, I thought it was important. I thought you want to be a well-rounded person. Well, it turns out with the internet, you can be an artist and have an extremely fulfilling, meaningful, financially successful life, and you don't know how to do math. I mean, we're really going to a new age. We should talk about AI too, because my research into AI is like all things, you know, with guns and internet, is it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. So the skill that this, 10-year-old girl, third grader, could use is prompting. It's called prompt engineering. She can literally type in the question, the math question, to the AI, and the math and the AI can generate if it's that serious. But what I would say, Mom, is take a deep breath and reflect on your own life. How often was math a critical determinant of your happiness and success in life? And then look at your daughter and see how happy she is to read and to do art and to do all these things that is making her soul feel alive. Because that love of art, that love of creating and reading, she can actually shift that into math if she wants, but she doesn't want to do that right now. She's focusing her superpower on her creativeness, her reading, these types of stuff. So that love, that passion can be redirected at some point. But when you're saying you have to do this, this is what you must do, this is a mandate, this is a requirement, you're going to get penalized if you don't do this math project, it basically like makes learning no fun. And say, I'm not going to do anything. And what I would say, Mom, is that the goal of parenthood is to have your child know that you are trustable and love them unconditionally. If that's all your child gets by the time they leave at age 18 or 20 or whatever, it's that my mom and dad, they love me 100% unconditional, and I can trust them, because we are going to live in the most amazing times in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. That trust is being broken. And I have families and friends, their families are falling apart. And it's happened the last 4 years. Couples are getting divorced in their 40s and in their 60s. And, you know, like a long life living. And it's like, okay, so the people are spreading apart and people are finding a new tribe, but you want your child to look back at you and say, you know what? My mom and dad love me and I can trust them. But if you're using coercion and intimidation against your child looks up at him and is like, I thought you're supposed to love me. You know, I was spanked as a child and my mom would spank me. Oh, this hurts me more than it hurts you. I say, how is that working? Well, now I understand. She was spanking me because she wants me not to live a bad life.
Yeah.
But now she says, you know, that was the only tool that I had. So that's all I knew. So that's the story, is that we just repeat what our parents do because we don't know any better. And so the questions are really good, and we can start asking better questions. And I'm so glad you brought up that question about the math, because I have some friends that homeschooled or unschooled, and they didn't force anything on their child, and they didn't read until like age 12. And of course, their family members, you know, extended families are like, oh my gosh, your son's going to become, you know, a ne'er-do-well and, you know, a bum. And now he's, I think, 22, 23, married, he's got a great management job. He's on his way because his mom and dad didn't force him. I also have another funny story. The unschooling family, let their child play video games. And this is another difficult conversation. Like, my son plays video games all the time. Well, She trusts in her son. She believes in her son. And I think he's about 10 or 11 years old. And he's like, Mom, I want to become a concert pianist. And the mom says, what? He's like, yeah. He says, I was practicing already. He says, because I was playing good at video games and have good hand-eye coordination, it applies easily to the piano. And so, as boys become men, as girls become women, something changes inside of them. And it's really important, I think, to understand the arc of a life, right? We're born, we have these kind of ages and phases, and then, family and age and dying. Like, this is just life. There's nothing, bad about it. It's just life. So the sooner a child can see, this is my life, and I'm going to be on the same arc, and I'm going to be like grandpa one day, I'm going to be like mom, dad one day, then you start to think, really big questions. I want to read this quote because I think it's relevant for this conversation about art. Yeah. This is from Frederick Gates. He was the business advisor to John D. Rockefeller. This is in 1913, as they were funding the General Education Board. He said, quote, in our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present educational conventions fade from our minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We are not to raise among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply. Okay, this is over 100 years ago, saying they don't want artists. They're like, hey, we got it. We got enough as we need, and this is sufficient. So this is why I really am encouraging parents to allow their artist son or daughters to grow and develop, because we need the imagination. Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is only what is known, but imagination includes all that is or ever will be or ever could be. So that's what artists do. Artists are tapping in from their mind, and eventually they'll say, oh yeah, I got to make some money, or, I got to find a family, or whatever it is. But in these first, 12 years, 14, maybe 16 years, allow them that freedom where they get to have as much time doing what they want. And then they get bored and they're like, I want to do something else. Mm-hmm. And then that natural drive and natural curiosity, which they cultivated because you and mom and dad were facilitating that environment where asking questions is okay. Changing subjects is okay. Opening up new books and trying new things is okay, versus this is what you have to do. It's on the schedule. This is the way it is, And I remember I asked my freshman teacher in English, because English was getting crazy, And I was like, man, why do I got to write this paper? She says, well, you do want to graduate, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, I want to graduate. So I had to write this paper. So this is why I give, high school diplomas very quickly, get them out there. And if you start seeing the world as a classroom, start seeing teachers everywhere and resources everywhere, it changes, versus having to be told what to do, like a cog in the wheel, like an obedient consumer, clerk, a soldier, right? It's like, well, what if we think for ourselves? What if we have our own consciousness, our own moral conscience and intelligence to pursue and explore? Then I think it's becoming a very fun thing to learn and grow, try new things, and get involved in the community.
Yeah, so fascinating. David, I tell people all the time on my channel that happiness is not a destination, it's a choice. And, at the end of the day, we have to go choose happiness. I think that's a lot of what you're talking about, is allowing them some choice, and what makes them happy, maybe. And did I articulate that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I love happiness. I love fulfillment, achievement. And these are the real questions that I was searching for, as a young boy, but I didn't have the, strong male mentors around. And of course, I went to public school. And then eventually I got to find some mentors, through books sometimes, through seminars sometimes. And I started to like make relationships with them, and I would go up and shake their hands and say, hey, how can I help you? So I'll give you another hack for apprenticeships, because I think apprenticeships are one of the key things even for your homeschool co-op potentially.
Yep.
So my definition of an apprenticeship is the transfer of knowledge and skills by an experienced person to a younger, eager student in exchange for a service that the young person provides for the older person. And generally it's younger and older, it doesn't have to be. But the idea is that, hey, you have these skills, let's say for your solar. Okay, your solar stuff is very interesting. So maybe you have someone around you that's 10, maybe 12, maybe 14, and they're like, man, Tag's got the solar stuff. I want to learn that. So say, okay, let's create either a proposal or maybe just go up and meet them and say, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to volunteer for you and I want to donate my time for you. So just so I can be around you, and I'll carry the things, I'll dig the holes, I'll do whatever you want in exchange that you can share with me how you do the solar stuff. And then at that point, you can negotiate whatever is a win-win. But the idea is that you have a young person who wants to learn, you have an experienced person who needs help or assistance and would take, free labor or free support, and you make it a win-win. And so this is the idea of, software development, architecture, computers, health, nutrition. I mean, all these things, music, there's all these proven paths of apprenticeship that are essentially free. Now, back in the old days, let's say you were a cobbler, you wouldn't take on an apprentice for free because a lot of times these guys were flaky and they would leave, right? You didn't have, he was a complete stranger, so they would pay you, hundreds, thousands of dollars for a 3-year apprenticeship or a 5-year or something like that. And eventually you would go through their apprenticeship program and they say, yes, I'm a cobbler. Okay, who was your master or who was your teacher? Oh, it was, John Jones. Oh, okay, he's got a good reputation. Okay, so you can repair our shoes over here. And then he gets to start his own business because he went through that apprenticeship process, that approval process, that credibility, a building process. And again, this is where colleges and universities kind of got in between. And they're like, if we can convince the world that they need a college degree to succeed, then we're going to collect, what, $20,000 to $50,000 a year for 4 or 5 years. And then we can put them in debt in perpetuity, and their college debt's no longer erasable, right? You can't go file bankruptcy and have your college debt. I mean, these guys have thought this out very deeply, and this is why I get very passionate about it, because it's like, wow, this is a personal thing that they did, for me and my family and people around me. So to find the solution, I think apprenticeships is one of them, that you can get that win-win, especially in the community. I mean, because you want to build a strong community and have intergenerational impact in your intentional neighborhoods. It's like, okay, well, we're looking for let's say an herbalist apprenticeship, or we're looking for a solar or a house building or a water guy or whatever it is. And then that can be some kind of conversation you have in your homesteading co-op, where it's like, hey, we have this expert, he's looking for somebody, and then he can take some applications and begin to learn, or they can see who wants to learn these skills, and then why should you be the apprentice? So you can see how you make it a win-win, and it's basically not going to cost very much money at all.
Yeah. How amazing. David, before we go here tonight, we've been at this about an hour and a half. I tell the people all the time, on my channel, things like, what did you do outside your bubble, outside your homestead, outside your own individual life? What'd you do this year to spread freedom? What did you actually do? How did you go get in the fight? And so for everybody that's listening tonight, David's in the fight and he's doing it every day, and he's a freedom warrior who I respect. And there's not many chances we actually get to sit and have conversations with those who are in the fight. As Teddy Roosevelt once said, that the credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena. And David, sir, you're in the arena, and I respect you a lot for that.
Thank you.
Tell these people how they get a hold of you. First, we want to support you. We're going to go ahead over and we're going to make sure we subscribe to your channels and all those things. So give us the rundown. How do we support David Rodriguez?
Yeah. So firstly, if you want help you graduate your son or daughter, you can email me at info@thevaloracademy.com. You see some of my other links at the Linktree/David James Rodriguez, and that's probably the best place. The Linktree, you'll see some of the interviews and some of the things I've done on there. The Homeschool Leader Facebook group is free. I'll be launching some type of training here, hopefully in the next month or two, and because this is in the preparation period for the fall. I know you guys are thinking in the spring for the fall, but then you can take a look at the valoracademy.com and see the graduation process. But the Linktree is probably the best place. I have another group called Voluntary Living on Facebook. This is kind of similar to what Tag's doing, but just to facilitate and curate some content because it's intergenerational. And that's one reason we can take a deep breath, a sigh of relief that we didn't just get here in the last few years. It's been a buildup. So we also get the opportunity to have some intergenerational freedom solutions. I think empowering the children is one of the best ways to do that. The Linktree or Linktree/David James Rodriguez is probably the best place right now. I'm not sure if my davidjamesrodriguez.com goes there. And then take a look at some of the stuff we have, in those platforms. There's a Telegram as well. And reach out and info@thevaloracademy.com.
Yeah, well, you got a couple of YouTube channels too, don't you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Freedom Lover Show and John Taylor Gatto. Education Options TV is one that probably you find a lot of good content. You'll see some old speeches on there from the expos. Very powerful. That channel, we put a lot of heart and time into. I'm working on another show, which we've made about 9 episodes titled Voluntary Living. I think that's going to be the phrase moving forward because, again, focusing on solutions, it's like, well, what's the solution? It's like voluntary living. This is something that excites me. It's empowering for the individual because it encompasses all things: voluntary learning, voluntary business, voluntary health, all the things that I see the future. I mentioned the evolution of freedom from the monarchy to statism to voluntarism or voluntary living. I really do believe we're going to get there, and it might take some decades or some generations, but we have the answers. And you can read some of these things. One interesting resource was by Murray Rothbard. It's called For a New Liberty, and he goes over how we would live and operate in a society without a coercive government. What about the police? What about the soil and all the contracts, the railroads, the roads in general, right? These are real questions that I found some answers, and he put this out 50 years ago. And so he's put a lot, and that was his life's work. One of his great contributions to society was letting us know about the incentives, and how would this work? Well, number one, we're all equal, and it's not okay to use coercion against peaceful people. I think coercion is the problem. Consent is the solution. And to begin asking questions like, what is your moral code? What's your moral compass? How do you determine right from wrong? If somebody would have told me at age 8, I would have got it, but they don't teach that to children because a child in the school system would point out the immorality of the force and the coercion, so it's important we have a moral educational process conversation too, like what is right and wrong. And I understand there are some kind of gray areas, but for the most part, you just don't force people. You don't threaten people. It's very simple. And just because you have a special uniform or you have a business card from some agency, you're not allowed to use force and coercion. So I think the ostracization is a great method also. You don't have to use violence, but document. If you're ever being violated by the school system, the CPS, government in general, video recorded. Audio's better than nothing, but video's the best thing. We want to expose the people who are being thugs and, let them see themselves. Sometimes it takes years for people to realize, what, I was on the wrong team. I was on the wrong side. But the winning side is going to be team freedom, team consent, team voluntary living, because it's so simple and it's just going to duplicate and reverberate. And pretty soon, and it's already happening now, visual artists, musical artists, movies. I'm in communication with a movie director now, We're trying to raise 500 grand. So if you have any investors out there that want to fund a film, I'll send you the treatment. We'll jump on a call with this movie director, because all these movies are putting these agendas in this Hollywood, blockbuster movies. But this guy's made over 30 movies, and he got blackballed from Hollywood because he wasn't going to play the woke stuff. And so now he's a courageous man. I would say, pretty risky business, but he's got 3 kids, and his kids have never gone to government schools. So, we really connected over that. But if you want to fund some type of projects like that, let me know, send an email. But it's just kind of seeing what you care about the most. I mentioned it earlier, find an injustice on the earth and spend your life trying to correct that injustice. I think that's a great piece of advice. So find out, because we all want to have comfort, right? There's a Super Bowl, there's television. Yeah, we can do all these things, and but we can't live our life doing that, especially to the men. That's what they taught me, to just be a consumer and just watch versus live. The Roosevelt quote. I love that quote. And that's being in the arena. And so it's easy that somebody on the stands is watching you or I or someone else out there getting beat up, but they're not in the arena. But if you're in the arena, then your decisions matter, your actions matter. But if you're, just watching and eating popcorn and commenting, you're not making a difference. So that's what we want to do. We really, I think, want to lean into the idea that your life matters. You came to earth for a significant reason, and don't waste it on consumerism and corporatism. Find something that you actually care about and that you want, maybe even written on your tombstone. Find something that you actually get soul power from and soul strength from. And I guarantee you, there's other people who care about that subject too. And then you go find those people, go to the events, go to the courses, join online webinars or whatever, and find your tribe. And you'll start to realize there is a mass self-ownership awakening, personal responsibility awakening. And it's heavy lifting, but it's a real solution versus begging permission from some guy, thousands of miles away, who doesn't know your name, who's your alleged representative. I think we're kind of beyond that point where it's like, okay, we see what's coming. We get to prepare for it. We get to rebuild civilization from something that we want. And this is why I think it's important for young people to dream big, to think big, even adults, even us old farts, like have a dream. You're going to be here in 10 years, most likely, probably 20, maybe 30. People are living longer these days, and, all this type of natural health solutions is coming out, and we're finding ways to eliminate disease and these things by real healers. So we're probably going to be here to our 80s or 90s or beyond. So play that game and get into the arena and start taking up the mantle of leadership for whatever you're passionate about or curious about, and understand that the children are watching us, they're mimicking us, and they're following us. They don't know what they don't know, and they're just following along as as they see us. I got a funny story here, and maybe we can wrap on this one. Is the story of the ham in the oven at the Christmas dinner. So the daughter says, the mother tells the daughter, go cut the ends off this ham. And she says, okay. And she's cutting the ends off the ham. And she says, Mom, how come we cut the ends off of this ham? And she's like, I don't know. Go ask your grandmother. So she goes into the room and she says, Grandma, why did we cut the ends of the ham off? And she says, oh, because our oven was too small, so we had to cut the ends off of the ham to fit it into the oven. So the mother passes on this tradition, which was based on something which is irrelevant today. So there's all these traditions that have been passed on, and we're starting to realize this is useful and this is not. So what can we do to help usefulness and goodness and truth and honor and integrity and peace and morality continue? Because you tag are a light, I'm a light, the listeners here, you guys are a light, and we're going to get through this, but we just got to realize where we are in the game, in the history of humanity, in the freedom awakening, because it's probably the most exciting time to be alive. So choose something that's exciting for you and be the light, be the example, be the leader, and link up, find us online, join us, because whatever the next event is, we'll be there. I'm going to be at the Exit and Build Land Summit in Texas. And I'll probably be at Jim Gale's event next November as well. So this is what it takes, find the events that are fun. I know you have an event. Is your event in summer or the fall?
We have two here in Kansas. We have the two events that go on. One, this will be coming up the first week in May, and then the next one will be in September. But we have two here every year.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully I can, come out there and meet your community, Chad. I mean, I'm so inspired by what you're doing as well. Such a strong leader and a caring man to see what's going on and to not force the jab on your employees, man. A lot of respect for you, brother. A lot of respect for the people that are standing up for what's right. And at some point we get to choose a mountain that we dedicate our life to, and choose it now rather than later, and find something that you value, that you cherish, and put yourself in front of that, because that time is coming, and we're going to get through it. It's going to be beautiful, but we're all going to be tested, I feel, and we're going to, be put to the limits, and we don't have to do it by ourselves, but we can do it today by learning and applying, empowering the children. And this is, just a beautiful time to chat with you, Tag, and I look forward to doing it again and seeing all the cool things you're up to. But yeah, for the people who want to reach out, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that maybe what we could do next is I'll get Callie Blackwell on, who's a freedom warrior from a medical perspective, and maybe Jim Gale from a food perspective. And we'll get David Rodriguez on from an education perspective. We'll bring someone on from the financial freedom perspective, and we'll just have ourselves a freedom roundtable. That sounds like fun.
That sounds beautiful, man. All these systems that are being exposed and going down, and have some luminaries, visionaries out there that are painting the future and showing a path forward. I would be honored to join you in that.
Yeah. Hey, I will absolutely make that happen. I talked to Jim this morning a little bit and yesterday a little bit. So I'll put something together and we'll do a roundtable on taking it back.
Awesome, man. I can't wait for it.
All right, guys. Hey, David, Thank you for coming on, and everybody, thank you for being here tonight. And I will see you guys tomorrow on our live at 9:00. See you, everybody.
Good night.